right, okay, let's get started. Welcome back. This is the final session. Thank you all for coming. So today we are going to have a shorter session. We are going to finish off the Wordle clone. It was a funny reason it was bugging out last week. It was just a single line. We're going to do the deployment, and then we're going to talk a little bit about routing, making pages, apps multi-page, and then lastly, we'll finish off with a little bit about where to go on your React journey and where to progress to next. So we'll start with, okay, one thing actually. So literally an hour before this, I came to uni, the Wordle API and everything, it was working fantastically. 5 minutes ago, I tested it, and well, it seems to just be down. So talk about fantastic timing. Like it was literally working an hour ago. So what we'll do instead is we'll just, because a little game we'll play in like 10 minutes. We'll just use normal Wordle, so that will do. Awesome. So we basically built out all the functionality, all the components, everything is there. But we had a small error where it was just typing on the single, not there. It was typing, like it just wasn't working. Turns out, somewhere down here, it was this section. We were updating the wrong piece of state. We were updating like the letter index rather than the row index. So we were always modifying the first row. Turns out you just modify that and it works as intended. So. And we've hard-coded the value in because the API is down, but there you go. It works as usual, so hooray. So all the functionality is done, but we need one more thing to do, and that is apply some conditional rendering when we're fetching the data. So last week, we created the fetch side effect, wrapped it in use effect, so it's not triggered on every single render. And all we're doing is when we get the solution from the server, we're setting it in state, then that triggers a re-render of the entire app. So then that instance of the Wordle game uses that word fetched from the API, so like Crane or React or something. But typically, and I'm sure as you know, when you're fetching data in a application, there's different states. There's an error state if the data fails to load, which is very common. And there's also the loading state. So if you're loading like a social media post, you have sort of like a skeleton loader in place. So we need to consider those states and then adapt the UI depending on it. For the Wordle clone, we're not really going to worry about error states, which I guess is quite ironic because there's an error today. That's just funny. But we'll do the loading state. So last week, we defined a bit of state called isLoading and setIsLoading. And then when we set it to true because initially when you load the page, you're making the call, so you are loading. And then once we fetch the data, we're setting isLoading to false down here to indicate that now we can re-render the app because the data is fetched. But how do we do that? How can we apply some form of conditional rendering to show like a loading screen while that request is being made? And it's actually surprisingly simple. All we are going to do is we're going to apply some JSX with the curly braces, and then isLoading, and then we'll just do a simple paragraph, nothing fancy. So if it is loading, it will render that paragraph. Otherwise, we will just copy paste this, and then go there, and then it's loading. Now, it actually might have fixed itself. Okay, maybe it is working now. That's good. Interesting. Let's just double check on here. Okay, now it's actually working. Awesome. So what's going on here is when on this line 25, when this fetch request is being made, we're just going into this ternary statement, and it's rendering the paragraph. And then once the data has been fetched, and we're causing a re-render with the setIsLoading to false, we're triggering a re-render, and then it's going to resolve to the Wordle part over here. So that is all fantastic, and we're done. Really simple, and of course it loads really quick. That's just the nature of network requests, but you can sort of see it. And just to make a small change into the Wordle part, because I thought the API was down, but I guess not, we will go here, and this is just passing the fetch solution down into the app. And then let's just see if it works. So is the word Crane? No. Is it like React? No. Maybe it's like lemon, who knows? But anyways, it works. That's Wordle. That's basically the app done. So now we are going to deploy it. I think it's very important knowing how to deploy your apps rather than just having them run locally. So we're going to go over to Cloudflare. Cloudflare is, oh my gosh, that's very bright. So Cloudflare is a free service. It's fantastic for hosting all sorts of apps. They offer built-in web security, domains, like so many features that are so helpful. So I strongly encourage you to choose Cloudflare when hosting any form of web application. You can use GitHub Pages or Heroku, many services out there, but they really are the best. They offer so many security features that it's fantastic, and it's very easy to use. So once you've created an account, you will navigate over to the workers and pages part. We care about the pages. All you do is you click on create, and then we go over to the pages section, and then connect to Git. You need to connect to your GitHub, obviously. I already have it connected. We are on Ready to React session 3 and 4, so I'll select that repository, and we'll go to begin setup. You can name it. We'll just keep it default. Production branch, I'm sure you know what that means. Framework preset. Now, this part's important. They already have a built-in option for us. It's React Vite here, and that fills out all that stuff. We don't need to modify it. Environment variables, we don't really care about those either. And then we just click save and deploy. I already have one named that way, so we'll just like call it alt, something like that. There we go. And then that's going to deploy, and it deploys it to their global CDN. If you don't know what that is, it stands for Content Delivery Network. So they distribute this code across hundreds of servers all around the world. So whenever you're trying to load the page, it loads very fast. And if you have the server in like the United States and you're trying to load it in the UK, it's obviously going to take longer than if you're in the United States. But having this distributed nature, you ensure a consistent load speed. And we don't expect any errors, of course. It's been tested, it's already deployed. And we're done. It's that simple to host your app. GitHub Pages is a bit more complicated, but this really is amazing. Whenever you push a change to a repository, it can trigger a new build. And then you can be notified when it's successful. So that's wonderful. And then we should see it working. However, sometimes it takes some time to propagate. So it has actually worked, but it might take a couple minutes to finally work. So we'll just go over to the previous one. We'll just go back to minimize screen. And now is finally time to play the game that I wanted to play. So I have like 6 boxes of Heroes chocolate, and sort of like as a thank you to you guys, although only 6 people get the boxes of chocolate. So what we're going to do is, the aim is to try and guess the word in our Wordle clone. So if you want to, we're going to, put your hand up, someone say a word, and then I'll ask someone else, they choose a word, and if you get the word correct, or if you don't, you'll just get a box of chocolate if you put your hand up. So does anyone want to start first? Okay, yeah. Okay, I don't think it is React, but that'd be funny. So React. Okay, so it's not. It's an E and an A. Anyone want to try another word? Yeah. Snare. Like that? Perfect. Okay, that's good. That's good. Anyone want to follow for that? You can have some time while I just persuade you. We have like these. You just get one. You just have to raise your hand, so you get one. Yeah, sure. Basis. No, I didn't really think about this because if if you get it like now, then there's okay. Did you have your hand up or? Okay. Well, you could just say a wrong word and you still. But you can take your time. Yep. Nice, nice. That's awesome. Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. I've got two left. So if you want a box of chocolates, this is your chance. Meals. Meals. Like that. Perfect. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Pages. Oh my gosh, that would actually be really funny if you know. Oh no. Okay. Um. Okay. Now the app doesn't actually tell us what the word is, but maybe we can just quickly cheat. So we're not left confused for the rest of the year. What was it like? Solution. It'll appear at the bottom. Oh wait, no, because this is the live version. Oh my gosh. Okay, no. Yeah. Okay. There's actually no way of knowing now because the network tab. Yeah. I mean, we can't guess anymore though. Okay. Uh, I can check DevTools, but I don't know if the network request is saved. Uh, I don't know how you access the history. Uh, no. That is unfortunate. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So like, because I didn't have DevTools open, it like that doesn't show it. I don't know because if we like refresh it, it won't work. Well, I guess you'll be left uh being curious for the rest of the year. You know, this wasn't actually how I thought this would go. I thought we'd guess it. And but um, to avoid running around, like if you put your hand up, I mean, I sort of remember your faces. Just like come at the end, and then like pick it up. So, I mean, congratulations. Thank you for playing the game. Um, okay, okay, that's a bit of fun. So now we're done with the World of Clone hosting. I think that went pretty well. Now we're gonna now we're gonna talk about making our apps multi-page. So, funny thing about React is I'll just go into uh, our Wordle code base. Um, so funny thing about React is there's actually only one page. So in a lot of other, basically anything that isn't React and maybe other libraries as well, whenever you have different pages on a website, you sort of create like an index, maybe like homepage.html or index.html. You create a new HTML file for every single page that you want on your website. But with React, because it constructs the UI from the ground up, and it's very dynamic and it creates and destroys this tree, we don't need all these extra HTML pages. We just need one because the fiber tree, what React renders, is it's not tied to any specific page. It's more of a data structure. Well, it is a data structure, it's a tree. But and it just inserts that into one HTML page in this div root. This is just template code. Whenever you install React, this is what you get. This isn't something I've written. So what if we go to main here, what we're doing is this function create root is a React function from the library, and it says, okay, pass me an element from the DOM. So for example, that root element that we just saw, and then render the app. So that's the the root node of the fiber tree, and then just chuck it in there and show it to the user. So we don't need all these extra pages, but I think it's quite clear that when you have an app, a website, you do want multiple pages. So how do we do that? And we do that with a library called React Router. It's the de facto library that you want to use for making your apps multi-page. It's so popular. I don't think there's any other one you'd want to use. And we have a code base for this. So I'll just get the window set up. We don't need any of this anymore. It's so bright. And then terminal run dev. Okay, perfect. That is the template code. There's no code blitz for this. It's just locally, although the code is on the GitHub. And we're just going to make a simple, like really, really simple website to demonstrate how we can make our apps multi-page. So first thing we're going to do is we need to define where we're going to have our routes. Like, what routes are we going to have and what are they going to render? So we have the React Router library imported here, and we're taking three components. We're taking the browser router. This is just saying we're routing in a browser, because you can route in for example, like a mobile app, or there's like this thing called a hash router. They're different things, but browser router. Routes, that's just going to define our routes, and route is going to define a specific route. And these are components. So what we're going to do is go browser router, and then inside we will go routes, and then inside that we will go route to define a specific route that we have on our app, which is really just a page. So first off, we'll have just the normal /. All web pages have this. This is what a server is going to fetch first, just the standard / or /. And then it takes another prop, and this is the element we want to render. So for example, the part of the UI. And here we are going to do a page component that we're going to create shortly, links, and then we'll create the constant variable in a second. And then we're just going to copy paste this 2 times. And we're going to have a JavaScript route. So we have a page about JavaScript, and then we'll have another route about Tailwind there. Perfect, that's all good. And again, the browser router highlight, thank you. So browser router is defining, okay, whatever tags are included, whatever components are included as children, interpret these as pages or routes on the web page. And then here, we're just passing in 2 props, the path, so the URL we type in, and then the element, the component we render. And now, this isn't tied to React Router, but we're just using this to demonstrate. So we'll have an array called links, and it's going to have, it's going to be an array of objects, and each object is going to have a name, and this is just going to be the name of the page. So of course, we'll have a home page. Then we'll have a path, which represents the path that you have after the base URL. And of course, for a home page, it would just be /. And then next up, we'll have a JavaScript page, because React is a JavaScript library after all. And then the path will be JavaScript. And then lastly, we'll have Tailwind. Speak about Tailwind shortly. And then a path, Tailwind. And again, this isn't like specific to the React Router library, but it'll make sense in a second. So that's all set up. We need to make this links. You know what, just to be lazy, I'll just remove the S from there. And now we're going to go into our page component. This is a basic component representing a page. It's not going to have any fancy features. And we're, of course, accepting that links array as a prop. So first thing we're going to do is we'll notice that we're importing a couple of things from the React Router library. We're importing a link, which is a component that allows us to navigate between pages. And then we're also importing useLocation, which is a custom hook. Custom hooks are hooks like some third party, for example, React Router, have created using the existing hooks like useState and useEffects. And they sort of wrap them in a function called useLocation. It's pretty common in libraries to start them with use. And we'll see shortly how we go about this. So we'll do the HTML side first. So we have a div, and then this is just going to be our container for the page, and we'll give it the class name page container. And then inside, we are going to render a navigation. This will make sense shortly. but we're just going to have sort of 3 different links we can click on, and we're going to display those differently depending on the page you're currently on. And semantically, you want to use the nav element because you're navigating. This is just good for accessibility, and it's just good practice. And then inside of that, we're going to render a list. We've seen lists before. And then we'll give that the class name page links. And then inside, we're going to escape using JSX and then do rendered links, which we will do now. So rendered links is links.map. And what we're going to be doing is we're creating sort of HTML on the fly. We've done this plenty of times before. And we're going to map over that links array, those objects that contain a name and a path name, and then construct something to show to the UI based on what we're reading. So we'll go links.map, and then we can interpret each element of that links array as its own link. And then just like that. And we are going to return a list item, and we're going to give it a key, which is just the name of the link. This is guaranteed to be unique because you're not going to have 2 pages with the same URL, otherwise they link to the same page. And then inside, we are going to use our new component imported from the React Router library called link. And it takes a number of props. We don't really care about most of them. Some have advanced use case, but you don't need them most of the time. We just care about the 2 and the class name. The 2 is basically when you click on this link, where are we going to? What page are we navigating to? Of course, this is dynamic depending on the element we're reading. So we'll go link.path, and that's the whole path. And then class name, we'll come back to that in a second. So we'll just leave it for now as null. And then inside, we are going to render the link name. And then there we go. We have our links. Now, before we start clicking on them, it's important to note, why can't we just use an anchor tag? I'm sure you've seen these before. So you have href and then some URL, and then you define, I don't know, where you want to click to. It's a really important difference, and it has to do with the paradigm shift that you go through when learning React, because it's all about constructing the UI itself, React internally. There's this sort of natural cause that whenever you reload a page manually, it's basically loading the page from scratch. So every time I click this, React is being forced to re-render the entire componentry, the entire fiber tree from scratch. But and the default behavior of anchor tags is whenever you click on anchor tag maybe to an about page, it forces the page, it forces the browser to refetch the page. Maybe it's cached in the browser, but it is forcing it to sort of go through that process again and reload it. But just from what we've seen, if we used anchor tags, we're going to be forcing React to re-render componentry every single time. And imagine if our React app is massive, huge, thousands of components, and every time you're navigating between pages, you're re-rendering it. It's just a waste of performance, and it's really silly to do that. So this is what the link tag solves. And how it works under the hood is it's sort of tied to a piece of state, and it tracks the URL. And whenever the URL changes, it updates that piece of state and tells React to only re-render the parts of the UI it actually needs. Now, if you have different pages, a lot of the time you sort of are still rendering quite a lot. But sometimes you have layout components, and a lot of components are used between different pages. So, for example, like a header or footer. For example, look at YouTube. I mean, the only thing that's different is the content that you're looking at. Everything else on the page has the same structure. So that's why the link element is used. So yeah, it might not seem obvious at first, but that's why we use it. Now, it might be nice if, depending on the page we're on, there's some form of indication. Maybe it highlights blue. But how can we do that? So obviously, where we are, we can get that from the URL, and we can just look at that and see, okay, is this URL matching this link name? And if it is, highlight it blue. there's various ways to go about that. I mean, you could just access the window, like element itself, and then wrap it in a side effect and then pull it out there. But this is a library, and with React, you often find yourself using a lot of libraries that have a lot of built-in functionality that solve a lot of the things that you want to do. So why wouldn't you just use that? Why reinvent the wheel? And this is what the use location hook is going to allow us to do. And the syntax is as follows. So we're declaring a variable, we're giving it constant because we're not going to be modifying it, obviously. And then we call it as such. We go use location. And all this is doing is it's just assigning a location object based on the current page we're on. And it has various properties like the path name, like the hashtag, and a ton of other things. But we only care about one of those. So now we have this and we can access it. We're going to go over to the class name, and we'll do a template literal. So we'll go like this. And then we're just accessing that variable that we declared. And it has a path name property that's going to match exactly to the slash, then JavaScript or slash nothing or slash, tailwind. And then we're going to check if it's equal to the link.path. And if it is, we'll do the double and sign and then apply the link alt class name. And there you go. So all we're doing is we're accessing this object that we get from the hook, comparing it to the value we're iterating over. And then if they're equal, apply the alt thing. And then to give you the demonstration here, you can see we're clearly on the home page because there's nothing in the URL bar. Then if we go to JavaScript, it changes, Tailwind, it changes, and so on and so forth. And that's basically how routing works. It's super simple. It's not complicated at all. You can get quite advanced with these things, and you can do these things called lazy loading, and then you can nest routes inside of other routes. So it's very typical that you have a sort of, you have protected routes. So when, sometimes you need an account to access a page. So you can do all sorts of things. And you can nest layouts and like only fetch a specific component if the route you're currently in is like a certain like string. It's really cool, but most of that you don't even need. But I hope this demonstrates how easy it is to set up routing. All you need is to import the React router library over here. And then, you only need those 3 components. Add routes like that. If we wanted to add another one, we could, but we're not going to. And then whenever you need to read something or link to something else, you just use the link components. That simple. So that pretty much talks about that side, and we've done. This session was going to be a bit shorter, so now all I'm going to talk about is just some things to be aware of with React, where to go if you've enjoyed this, and just what the bigger picture looks like with React. I feel like I said React quite a lot there. So one thing that we didn't get to cover because we'll re-record the session at some point, but it was session 2. We were rendering our lists. We were creating HTML on the fly, as I call it, and using this key component. But sometimes you're fetching so much data from a server, like hundreds and thousands of like products, for example, and you want to display those all to the UI. You can think of any e-commerce site that you visited. If you're iterating over and creating all that HTML for like thousands of elements, even if it's just hundreds, it really impacts performance so much, because every time you make a state update that changes one of those elements, you're then like re-rendering a ton of stuff and then looping to see if it's all different, and it's just so there's this advanced technique that you implement using a library. So React, call it React window, and it's window rendering. Now, you probably don't need this for most use cases because there's different ways of optimizing this. For example, pagination, you just have different pages, so you're only limited to displaying like 50 things at a time. But sometimes you do need to display everything at once. If I don't really, when you're, I don't know, browsing like Amazon or something, and like you have to keep pressing the button, wouldn't it just be nice to scroll forever? But of course, the performance gain, and this is where React Window comes in. This is just one library that implements this way of handling large lists. And what it does is it takes the dimensions of the viewport and calculates, okay, how many of the component you're trying to render can I fit onto this screen that would fill up the screen? And then as you scroll, it then dynamically inserts them. So you're only ever looking at like 10 or so components at a time. And you would think if like you're scrolling really fast, there's like going to be like some blank space before it loads in. But this just speaks to how quick React is. It's so well optimized that when we come to solving more complex problems related to rendering, such as this, it's not really an issue. And this is just, I think this is one of the coolest things. I remember when I started developing projects that are much more complex, there was this noticeable just slowdown of the UI, which is so important when you're making your apps. People aren't going to use your website if it's slow. If you click on a button and it takes 3 seconds for something to happen, you've just lost most of your users. So using these creative ways to ensure that speed and that interactivity remains very responsive is so essential, and that's why so much research is going into making these metrics as small as they possibly can be, because there has been it, it does affect like the amount of money a business can earn. It's insane. So that's React and window rendering. Next up is React Native. Now, I personally haven't used React Native, but I know there's been some talk about it in my cohort. So I'm sure people like, I mean, okay, so this is really cool. The thing about developing websites for browsers is you have to cater to every single possible screen size in existence if you want your app to be, usable or at least like good. But making something look good on mobile and desktop is such a pain. So maybe you just want to jump ship and, okay, I'm a mobile developer now. That's like one screen dimension that I need to think about. I mean, I almost did. And this is where React Native comes in. So how React works and how it renders isn't exclusive to the browser. In fact, there's 2 libraries that are installed. There's React DOM, and then I just think it's called like React when you create like a React project from scratch for like a website. React DOM is sort of like the backside, the rendering side. That's agnostic to the device you're on or where you're rendering. So browser or, for example, just a mobile phone for an app. And then like the other library dictates how that gets painted to the specific device you're trying to display on. And React Native is sort of that like alternate version of the library we just talked about. And you'd be surprised, the syntax is basically the same. So if you want to create a mobile app, you basically have most of the knowledge you need already. There's a couple of things that are different. So how you handle state, and for example, mobiles and apps in general, they have different security policies and how you can style them. And they offer more functionality and like less functionality in some ways. But it's not like you could probably quite easily implement most of the apps that we've been building with React Native with little trouble. So if you want to mobile development, I strongly recommend React Native. It's wonderful. I think you can even use it for like desktop apps as well. It's crazy. Okay, just a couple more things. Next up is Redux. So, oh my gosh, it's so bright. This is more looking ahead to the future. When you have really big, large scale, like massive apps that have so much state, so many things you need to keep track of. And again, Amazon or really e-commerce sites are best like example here because they are huge. Handling all that state like we were doing in, is it this one? Like we have like, I don't know, for exaggeration, like 20 pieces of state, and you're like, interacting with each one, updating each one individually. Imagine if that gets like much bigger. That's going to be a pain, and just take my word, it is a pain to handle, because you're tracking all these little different things, and then sometimes you have a component that's at like the top of the tree that has a bit of state, and then like 100 components down, you have like, oh, I also need the bit of state you're accessing, and the only way to do that is to pass it down as a prop through each component until it eventually gets there, and the code just becomes bloated and really disorganized and very sort of like spaghetti code. You don't want to have to be passing down a value so far that it just gets lost. And this is where state managers come in. And Redux is a very popular one. It's people are on the fence, like people love it, people hate it. I think it's amazing because there's so many ways to configure it. But basically what it does is we're not going to teach it, just going to talk about it at a high level. It wraps your entire React app in a context. And this just uses all the like inbuilt React functionality. And then how that context is defined is it essentially allows you to directly access a piece of state without having to drill it down to components. And how it works is basically creates a bubble that lives in like somewhere else that has all the states. It's sort of its own store, and we're just accessing that from the components. And you'd think, if I update a piece of state in that store that's like separate, does it trigger a re-render for the entire app? No. It uses this thing called the subscriber pattern. I think if you're doing 2.6 you recognize that. So it's nice seeing it applied in real world. So sort of the components that need that piece of state, they subscribe to the store, and then whenever a state update changes, a piece of state changes, the components get notified and they get re-rendered. So you're minimizing the amount of re-rendering you're doing. And if it wasn't clear already, optimizing re-rendering is a very important part of React. We didn't cover it here because you don't really need it, but you need it when you start getting into things that are really big. And a lot of libraries aim to solve this. And great thing about Redux is there's this thing called RTK query. I'll try and find it. And it's their built-in data fetching library. So again, React is one of those libraries where there's so many other libraries that you utilize to speed up development. Because with data fetching, it's actually quite complicated. We did a very simplified approach, but you need loading states, loaded, like success states, error states. Maybe you want to do polling, which is sort of you send a request every 20 seconds. YouTube do this on the view counter. If you've ever seen it on your phone, like every 20 seconds, the views like update, and they sort of like rotate to the new view count. That's what polling is. They're making a request to some server saying how many views does this video have, and then continuously updating the UI based on that. So again, this might all seem like a bit much, but it's mainly just to encourage you that there's so many tools out there that you don't need to reinvent a lot of these things yourself, and they're really easy to use. I think the one thing I love about React the most is how well documented all the libraries are. There's like a library for everything, and it's amazing. So that's that, and then lastly, okay, second to last is Tailwind. You might have seen it before, but it's a CSS sort of framework. I don't really think a framework works though. I don't know why they call it that. But it allows you to style all your components in line. So you might have done this a little bit before, where you have like styles, like with normal HTML, for example, and then you like access the styles directly. This is that, but like to the extreme. You have no need to create separate CSS files. And this has the advantage of you can have the logic, so like the JavaScript, that's the JSX side, and like iterating and like interaction, the HTML and the styles all in a self-contained component. So you're not switching between files and then you have like all these different files. You have everything in its own component. I think this is the true sort of like goal you should be aiming for, is to do everything in a component so it's fully self-contained. And again, I'm just plugging this because I love CSS, so we'll move on now. And then lastly is just to build something awesome. I'm sure everyone can like relate, but you sort of get stuck in tutorial hell, where you just keep watching new tutorials and new tutorials, and then you don't actually end up like building anything, but you think you're building something because you're watching a tutorial that builds something, but then when you come to build something yourself, you're like, oh. And I remember the first time I was building a React project, I was so confused, but I just kept at it, and I learned so much, and now I can just keep building things and keep learning, and it's just to if there's something you want to build, even if it's small, just build it. Even if you don't know how to build it, even if it's not perfect, like you just create something awesome, because I think it's so humbling being able to create a site that is used by people all around the world, and they're choosing to visit your site, even if it's for a couple minutes a day. I think that's what it's all about. So I really do encourage you to create something original. If you've ever had an idea, this is the time to create it. And I hope my course has taught you a bit. It's been really nervous being up here and first time teaching it, and in fact, it's like the first time public speaking. So I hope I've done a good job. Um, I don't know why I was still on that. Maybe we'll go back to React Native so it's more suitable. But it's just, yeah, thank you to everyone who's come to all these lectures. Massive thanks to the tech team and everyone on the society. And it's been a great experience for me. I hope you have all learned something. And we're going to end the course there. Make sure to pick up your chocolate, but I do remember your faces. And just, yeah, thank you so much for coming. And this is the end of React, Ready to React 2025. So thank you, everyone, and we'll leave it there.